microphone. Okay, good afternoon. I now call this public hearing of the Standing Committee on Social Development to order. My name is Jane Wayalin Armstrong. I am the MLA for Mofi Clutha Region and Chair of the Standing Committee. At this time, I will ask committee members in the room and online to introduce themselves.
Good afternoon. I'm Shauna Morgan, MLA for Yellowknife North.
Julian Morse, MLA for Frame Lake.
Not the one online.
Huron Testart, member for Range Lake.
Yes, good afternoon. Danny McNeely, MLA for the Sahtu region. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, members. Okay. Bill 8, an act to amend the Student Financial Assistance Act, is a private member's bill that proposes to increase the borrowing limit available to students under the Student Financial Assistance Program from $60,000 to $90,000. Bill 8 received second reading in the Legislative Assembly on June 12, 2024. This committee has been tasked with reviewing the bill to see if it needs any changes, if it has any issues we can solve, and if it is ready to continue on its path to becoming a law. That is our role in this process. We did not write the bill, but we are in charge with taking a very close look at it and making sure this bill represents the wants and needs of the NWT residents as best we can. This afternoon, committee will hear from the sponsor of the bill, MLA for Yellowknife Center, Robert Hawkins. Following that, committee will hear from the Honorable Caitlin Cleveland, Minister of Education, Culture, and Employment. After that, we will open the floor to any members of the public here today who wish to share their feedback on Bill 8 with committee. At this time, I would like to turn the floor to the sponsor of Bill 8, Mr. Hawkins. Please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, colleagues. I appreciate this opportunity to talk about the expansion of the SFA loan program for students. I'm here today to ask you to be bold and look towards helping those who put their trust in us to help foster opportunities so they can pursue their educational pursuits. Education, as we know, is the opportunity, the cornerstone, if not, to prosper and have a society thrive. And it is key to unlock the potential of young people who are trying to reach their goals and dreams. However, the rising cost of education has become a significant barrier for many students, preventing them from pursuing their dreams and certainly achieving their goals. So what is Bill 8? In its simplest form, Bill 8 is an adjustment in the line of credit that provides opportunities, a loan program for students to pursue their dreams. By supporting Bill 8, we can ensure that the students have access to quality education regardless of their financial background. As we know, SFA loan programs have been the hallmark of the NWT for years, but times have been changing. What was once affordable, many students struggle with financial challenges, whether they travel far or near, to cover things like fees, books, and other expenses along the way. Post-secondary education is already high now, but it's predicted to only increase in cost. For many, this has become a question about accessibility, equity, and certainly affordability. The intent to Bill 8 is simple. It will help financially buttress those through the loan program who are seeking educational opportunities and help them pursue their dreams. It is focused to bridge not just the regular programming of SFA students who go take their undergrad, but more focused and intended to seek further education through their graduate studies. The demands of jobs today require higher education, expertise. We need that knowledge. We need it for the jobs of today and certainly the jobs of tomorrow. There isn't, as an MLA, there isn't a week that goes by where people are always asking me, how do we continue to fill these jobs that we have open here, or these skills that are sitting as gaps in potential opportunities in the North? Our territory is so dependent on bringing these skills north, whether it's to Yellowknife, to the regions, or even to the small communities. We are desperate for these opportunities to be filled. Even basic jobs these days are requiring more and more education. So the old days of just having a little experience and knowing somebody may not be good enough. As a matter of fact, people are being challenged to pursue further education when they want to get into a technical position or even a leadership role as they want to proceed. And a lot of times, these require master's and even doctorate degrees. Ultimately, education is an investment in the future of the North, not just one individual, all individuals. Thereby enabling students to pursue educational aspirations through Bill 8, we will be nurturing the next generation of our leaders and certainly the people that help our communities grow. These are innovators, change makers, and it's time we help support the prosperity of the North. Education, frankly, will enrich us all. Let us not forget that. It will be the keystone for public good. The North is skill deprived, as noted earlier, and we are not unique in trying to fill these positions. That said, we're competing not just against Canada, but the world. They are aggressively pursuing individuals, our students, other workers we can find anywhere. They're selling them with a campaign of cost of living is better, pay is better, work-life balance is better. So this is why this loan program is so important, because it creates and fosters a direct relationship between Northern students and having them come back to contribute in the North. At the same time, Bill 8 is not just about providing assistance, as mentioned. It's about creating equitable and inclusive education and an inclusive society. Given these opportunities, this will allow many young people to realize their potential and become meaningful contributors here in the North. Then we must be vigilant as Northerners to keep an edge on trends, and this is a vehicle to help our people in a meaningful way. By not doing this, the program becomes less attractive. Our Northern skilled workforce starts to slip away. By way of briefly looking back, for experienced folks more like myself, in 2007, Bill 19 did exactly what this does. At the time, it raised the overall principal loan cap from $47,000 per student, that's the overall cap, to the current level of $60,000. 17 years later, costs rise, but the loan cap hasn't kept pace. Through inflation, it's almost as if it's actually lost 30% of its buying power since that time. So in other words, instead of 60,000, it almost represents closer to 38,500. Bill 8's intention is to change the max loan a student can borrow from 60 to 90,000. This will help reinstate the buying power that was set out in 2017. Now, some people may be interested in the overall revolving fund, about the impact that this may have. I'd like to address that and be frank about it. My cursory review is this won't have an impact on the current revolving fund for many years to come, even if at all. The revolving fund was last increased in 2014 from $40 million to the current level of $45 million, which had hit the financial wall back in those days. So it was increased to help address future potential. As of the current fiscal year, so in other words today, the fund is currently sitting at $41.36 million. So as you can see, there's still a fair bit of potential in there. ECNE may want to do more detailed projections, but we've taken a lot of years to progress since the last increase, and the needle has barely moved on the overall fund. So we still have lots of room and potential left. At the same time, the revolving fund is an arbitrary number. It's real money, that is true, and I wouldn't want to downplay that, but 45 million is no different than 55 million. It's a number the Assembly picks. So it's been given and directed by political direction. So why is this a meaningful change? Bill 8's focus is to direct support for those pursuing graduate studies and beyond. Currently, I'm aware of at least 20 potential Northern students that this would directly help. Of those 20 young people, frankly, we want them back in the North working here, contributing and investing their lives and careers here, helping other Northerners, whether in regions, in communities, or wherever they see the best fit for their future. But what's more important is, how do we face the dilemma of skills and shortage of talent? By way of example, and this is strictly an example, it says, I'm going to cite the Northern News Service's headline a few days ago. It says, the lack of lawyers for landlord-tenant cases is a huge gap in the access to justice. because people can't find lawyers to help them. So in other words, we have a skills shortage in many aspects of our life. To appreciate the weight of the financial challenges many students face, I did a quick snapshot of the legal studies by way of example. So the Canadian Law magazine pointed out that in 2018, law students in their third year graduate with a debt load of $71,000. And significantly, 13% of those surveyed have over $90,000 in debt. So in other words, our education for the future isn't cheap, but we need to find ways to support these challenges. The Canadian Bar Association, in a 2019 article called "Lograd Student Loans Burden," is an access to justice issue. It found that most law students are in debt and graduates owing in the range of $83,000. All of this is just frankly a lot of money. And if you don't have the ability to potentially borrow this, because I mean it's a strain, where do you pursue opportunities? We need to ensure that we connect with folks who can have the potential to pursue these skills and abilities. So why should this matter? Competition for skilled young people is high, let me stress that, and in the form of debt relief. So the Canadian Law also noted that the University of Manitoba has a debt relief program. It says for available students who remain in the province, they will help. That is another jurisdiction finding creative ways to help students. This is our way through our loan program. So we don't want to miss out on returning students. Bill 8, as mentioned, is nothing more than expansion of a financial line of credit for those who are pursuing at highest levels of education. It is not just anything other than that. It is to help those who can't afford to pursue studies. I'm asking for your support for the students who have worked hard, who continue to work hard, and who are certainly will be the foundation of our northern infrastructure. In a time when we need students to come back to fill essential jobs in a marketable world, we need to find every solution we can to encourage them to come here. In conclusion, I urge you to join me in supporting these opportunities for students. By working together, we can help break down some of these barriers to create educational pursuits and opportunities for an equitable society for all. And together we'll empower these students to reach for the stars, and we can help them achieve their dreams. Let's do this together, not as individuals, but as a future together. Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and I certainly look forward to any questions posed by committee. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, MLA Hawkins. Committee, are there any other questions? Are there any questions for the bill? Yeah, Ms. Morgan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Hawkins, for sponsoring the bill and bringing this to us. One question I have is, why did you choose the figure 90,000? Is there a significance to that? Are there calculations somewhere that this is what will be needed, or like why 90,000? Why not 80 or 100 or?
Mr. Hawkins?
Thank you. Well, in a perfect world, ECNE would be having this in regulations, and there'd be cost of living, and there'd be adjustments, and maybe that's the right place over the long haul. And I didn't put it in my speaking notes, but this is one of their issues in their job jar of doing one day, someday. So they will get around to doing this. The thinking of $90,000 came from doing a cursory review of the information out there about where do people, where their debt limit sits in the range of if they take a master's or a doctorate study. And it ranges in the range of $70,000 to $90,000. So I thought I'd start there and pick that as a reasonable amount. Now keep in mind, this is the potential, in other words, this is the full amount of what they could borrow through a loan program. This is not free money. This is a loan program. So they would still have to access it through the normal pursuits. So 90,000, looking at this particular time, going from when it initially was raised, I believe in 2007, it was raised $13 million from 47 million to 60 million. So looking at the cost of living, how things have changed significantly since then, looking at the current data of what students are being burdened with, I figured $90 million was the appropriate range. My apologies, $90,000. I misspoke. $90,000 for those who pursue master's and postdoctorate opportunities that made the most sense.
Ms. Morgan, do you have a follow-up?
I do have several other questions. Thank you, Madam Chair. One is, so if the loan is remissible and the student comes back here to reside and work, you know, they can get credits of $6,000 a year. And so if they had, and so that under the current system would take a maximum of like a 10-year period to get all of that forgiven. If it was 90,000, I think my math is right, you know, it would take up to 15 years. Do you have any concerns about like the length of time that it would take people to pay back or get loans forgiven? And connected to that, I mean, is your position that the $6,000 a year number should be changed accordingly so that it, you know, speeds up the time that they can get it forgiven, or do you think it's appropriate that it's just a much longer period of time that they would be owing or have this loan? Thank you.
Mr. Hawkins?
So I guess my position, frankly, is whatever it takes to get students to come back here with these skills. So is 10 years or 15 years? I don't think that's really the challenge or the question of today. It's trying to get them back here, and this is how we make more attractive. In other words, build that relationship through the student loan program. If they want to, if you are curious as to the position of should we allow more payments be credited through the remissible program, I think that's a discussion through the department to find out if they'd like to create a new tiered system through some type of regulation. But as far as I'm concerned, whatever it takes to get the students here, working, contributing, and living their lives and being part of the North is whatever vehicle it takes. So I don't, the time or length doesn't worry me. I think that's also outside of the bill, which is, but that certainly would welcome the discussion of it.
Ms. Morgan, do you have another question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sure, I'll ask one more question now. So, in your estimation, what are students currently doing to manage? Is it just that you see that students being prevented from being able to pursue graduate studies at all? They can't find the money, they can't find the loans, so they don't do it? Or that students find other places to get loans from? Or it's only students whose families, you know, have all kinds of money saved up that can do this? Or that students are doing it, but then they're staying down south and not working up here? I'm just trying to figure out, like, what will happen if we don't do this? What are the consequences in terms of students' lives? Thank you.
Mr. Hawkins?
I guess the first thing I'd certainly say and try to reemphasize, and I think it's a good question in all fairness, I mean, what would happen? I mean, so the goal of this is to, again, further build the ties between Northerners pursuing education and having them come back and being a part of a critical element of it in the sense of the growth of the North. So I think really the question is what are we doing to ensure that they come back? I mean, Manitoba itself says that if you take your degree there, your law degree that is, they will help, and you stay in Manitoba, you know, they're trying to find creative ways to take the pressure of the economics of people pursuing education and staying them. So in other words, they're treating it as an investment, really. And I think it's a brilliant strategy. Education isn't, it's like law. I mean, sometimes it comes down to money. And not everyone gets equal justice, and in some cases, because of financial issues, be it poverty, be it whatnot, being accessed. I mean, I want fairness of education built on the ability as opposed to, and create an equitable opportunity as opposed to just saying it's only for those special few. We have many young people, even I grew up in Fort Simpson with people you could see that, you know, they could do anything in the world. These are the opportunities and the vehicles that could help create and foster that. But maybe being from a single parent home or from a challenging situation, you would never see these things without special opportunities granted to them. That said, the last piece I want to point out is the territorial loan system is attractive. It's, in other words, financially, it's attractive based on interest rates. So if we're pushing someone to pursue something through a bank or other type of loan program, I mean, we run the risk of having lesser of a relationship and higher cost to the individual than they're making choices. So what have I heard anecdotally? I've spoken to people. I get a sense that people hit a wall financially, and that's where it ends. And those are people who I've spoken to in the writing in the past who talk about pursuing masters, but the wall, a financial wall, has hit them. So they don't do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Testart, do you have any questions?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Hawkins, the committee has heard from several students, and they seem to be quite supportive of these changes, the proposed changes that your bill has or is offering. I'm assuming that you didn't either come to this figure or this work just out of your own volition. This was brought to your attention by constituents or someone advocating for this change. Like, I'm assuming it wasn't driven by you, but rather driven by students who have approached you. Thank you.
Mr. Hawkins?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I appreciate the question because really it's the on-ramp bar I was looking for, the off-ramp, whatever you want to describe it as, to give credit to it. So first I'll say as MLAs, our job is to advocate for issues raised in the community, ones we see that could, whether it's brought by constituents or things we identify through our work and whatnot, that challenges. I have the pleasure of this particular initiative raised to me by someone in our gallery, Mr. Thomas, and I believe he may speak later today in support of the bill. So to kickstart my attention on this particular individual issue that is on the initiative, I have him and his family to thank for drawing it to my attention and to help advocate for. And I would also say I'd like to acknowledge and appreciate his support in help rallying the student troops to be involved and be aware of this particular issue, because without his support and his interest on this initiative, it may have slipped by. Now, whether it would have been addressed in some time, perhaps as the old saying used to go, the fullness of time, which who knows could mean when would that ever happen. That said, I think he deserves the lion's share of the acknowledgement and credit for nudging the issue along. Thank you.
Mr. Testart, do you have a follow-up question?
Just to close the commentary, like thank you for the clarification. I look forward to hearing more about from that. But I just wanted clarification that this wasn't something that you're thinking about and brought forward, but this was actually driven by students who are using these programs as a form of improvement, so we can people can continue their studies and hopefully come back here and provide those education those professional services that these changes would engender. And I think you've answered that question. And that's the feedback we're getting from the public is largely around that too. It's coming from people who are actively using the loan programs and see an increase as a benefit to their education. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Testart. Mr. Morris, do you have any questions? Okay. Sorry about that. Mr. McNeely, do you have a question?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, MLA Hawkins, there for making that presentation there. It's to me, it's well needed. We're upgrading our services to meet the challenge of the inflation that's going up there. If we can emphasize on the Elders Fuel program next, that'll be good. My summer has been very active in witnessing the high costs of living here in the Sahtu. In Air Supply, took some gasoline from Inuvik to Inuvik, and we did the math and working out the procurement price to airlift the gasoline to Fort Goodhoe came out to $3.80 per liter. That's just an example of our costs are going up, and our services to support the youth and education challenges should be going up as well. So given all that, I do support Bill 8. and I've got no really questions, so I just share my feelings in support of the bill. Must see, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Hawkins, do you want to reply? It was just more of a comment.
Thank you. No, I appreciate the comment and putting in perspective the cost of living challenge, whether it's in the communities or the north throughout. I mean, it hurts everyone. And just as an anecdotal reminder, looking at the average cost of tuition per year in school is over $7,000. I mean, I'm so old, and I feel like someone should say, "How old are you?" You know, I remember school at about $600 to $700 a semester. That's what it costs. So it's increased significantly in my memory of, although I'm not getting younger, but in my memory of time, in my time. So I could only imagine what it's like for young people in the next 5 to 10 years, and that's the whole point of this, is to address some of the cost of living challenges they're facing. And the last piece I'll say, just by way of example, Madam Chair, I'm not going to go through in great detail, but I just wanted to point out, I did a quick look at the University of Alberta, and to take the Bachelor's of Commerce program, so that's business, by the way, it's $27,000 per year to attend. That's their estimate. If you take the Faculty of Law, they're expecting just over $33,000. You know, if you want to take dentistry, some dental hygienist, $36,000. And so even just the arts program is just over $24,000 to go to school a year. And that's, of course, taking into some form of residency, because you have to live somewhere, and there's a high expectation you may need to even eat somewhere along the lines. But the point is these are not cheap programs anymore. And that was just one place. I mean, I didn't study every university across Canada, but I mean, I picked one of them closest to Yellowknife. In other words, the first gateway out of the NWT. So cost of living is going up, and I appreciate MLA McNeely noting that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hawkins, for appearing before us. Next, I would like to invite Honorable Caitlin Cleveland, Minister of Education, Culture and Employment, to the witness table.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you for inviting me to.
Yeah, I do. I just have to go ahead. Okay. Yes, no, proceed.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you for inviting me today to speak to the members of the Standing Committee on Social Development, members of the Legislature, and the public about Bill 8, an act to amend the Student Financial Assistance Act. I'd also like to thank the member for bringing this private member's bill forward. Today I am joined by Shannon Barnett-Aikman, Acting Deputy Minister, Nicole Beauchamp, Assistant Deputy Minister, Labour and Income Security, and Julia Mott, Senior Advisor to the Deputy Minister. Madam Chair, the Student Financial Assistance Program offers residents a variety of non-repayable grants as well as remissible and repayable loans to support them as they pursue their education. The bill proposes to increase the total amount a student can borrow through student financial assistance from $60,000 to $90,000. Its scope is restricted only to consider this increase. The department has prepared a presentation to inform committee and the public about the current program and the potential effects of increasing the loan limit for students, including the impact it may have on the revolving loan fund and on students' ability to repay their loans. I fully support exploring any options for ensuring the Student Financial Assistance Program continues to meet the needs of NWT students, including increasing student loan limits. However, it is important that before we make legislative decisions, even those that are targeted, we have the data and analysis to support them. Supporting students and ensuring that post-secondary education is more accessible is front of mind for me and for the department as well. I'd like to thank the member again for their passion on this topic and for advocating on behalf of NWT students. Thank you, Madam Chair. This concludes my opening remarks, and if committee and yourself agrees, I would like to pass to Assistant Deputy Minister to lead us through a presentation.
Yes, please proceed.
Do I start over? So thank you for this opportunity to share with you information on Bill 8, an act to amend the Student Financial Assistance Act. Today, we will provide you with a brief overview of the Student Financial Assistance Program, benefit types for full-time studies, current status, loan repayment, as well as information on data and the revolving loan fund. The SFA program provides financial assistance to eligible residents to assist with post-secondary education-related expenses. The cost of obtaining a post-secondary education is a shared responsibility, and that the SFA program is intended to help supplement a student's own financial resources by offering a variety of non-repayable grants and student loans to eligible residents. The department completed a review of the SFA program in 2023, and as a result, improvements were made that included an increase to benefit levels and removal of barriers during the 23-24 academic year. As noted, the SFA program provides a variety of non-repayable grants and student loans to residents. Eligibility for these types of funding are based on the student's student category, which are Northern Indigenous resident, Northern schooled, and Northern resident. The chart outlines the types of grants and students' loans that residents may qualify for based on their student category. For the purpose of Bill 8, the remissible and repayable loans are the only types of loans that impact a student's personal loan limit, and that all student categories are eligible for loans. The private member's bill is limited to increasing the personal loan limit from $60,000 to $90,000 for NWT residents. The department continuously reviews the SFA program to ensure it is meeting the needs of residents. This included increasing the loan limit from $26,000 in the 1990s to $47,000 in 2000 and in $60,000 in 2007. Although an increase to the loan limit has not occurred since 2007, the department did change the loan limit from a lifetime loan limit to a revolving loan limit in 2015. So the SFA program provides two types of student loans. One is the remissible loan that is intended to assist with monthly living expenses, and the amount is based on family size. A single student is eligible for $1,000 per month, while a student with 3 dependents is actually eligible for $2,200. Apologies for the error on the slide. The other is the repayable loan to assist with tuition, books, transportation, and other education-related expenses. The repayable loan is based on financial need and is up to a maximum of $1,400 per month. Both loans are advanced monthly each semester, and a student cannot have a consolidated loan balance exceeding $60,000 at any given time. Student loans are loans that must be repaid. Depending on the student's types of loans they receive and whether they return to the Northwest Territories will determine how they must repay it. Remissible loans may be forgiven, while repayable loans must be repaid. The current term of repayment varies from 1 year to 14 years. And I will share more on the loan repayment shortly. So the SFA program approves approximately 1,300 students each year. Overall, 75% of students accessing SFA benefits, including grants, are single students with no dependents. Approximately 52% of students are enrolled in an undergraduate degree, which is typically a 4-year program. Understanding that students may take longer than 4 years to complete a degree, the table shown provides a glance at the types and amounts of benefits that a northern schooled resident may qualify over 4, 5, and 6 years. It is important to note that the amounts shown are based on the average student pursuing a Bachelor of Arts and qualifying for the maximum allowable amounts under the basic grant and remissible loans. With that being said, the department acknowledges that the cost of a post-secondary education fluctuates from institution to institution and that the costs are on the rise. As such, it can be assumed that depending on a student's actual costs, they may access increased repayable loans compared to what is actually outlined. In that case, the loan limit would not be sufficient for a student who's proceeding past the 6 years. So a majority of the students that access student loans are northern schooled or northern residents. You will note that during the 23-24 academic year, just over 700 students received remissible loans, and that there is an increase of approximately 30% compared to the previous year. This is a result of extending eligibility for remissible loans to all northern residents within the last academic year. You will also see that there is a decrease in the number of Indigenous residents accessing repayable loans. This too is a result of the changes that were introduced in 23-24. During the 23-24 academic year, approximately $5.8 million in remissible loans were advanced, while $1.6 million in repayable. Although the SFA program provides a variety of non-repayable grants and student loans must be repaid, to help alleviate the burden of student loan debt, the department improved its suite of benefits and offers loan repayment incentives to encourage students to return to the territory upon ceasing full-time studies. Loan repayment incentives include forgiveness on remissible loans and 0% on repayable loans. Students are required to reside in the territory and apply for these incentives twice a year, in April and October. Students that do not return to the territory or do not apply for loan repayment incentives are required to repay their student loans. As noted previously, the term of repayment ranges from 1 year to 14. As noted in this slide, a student with a consolidated loan balance of $60,000 would be required to make minimum monthly payments of $467.07 over 14 years. If we were to increase that amount to $90,000, the minimum monthly payment would increase to $700.51. This is taking into account the current interest rate of 4%. The department wants to ensure that there is a balance between assisting students in their pursuit of a post-secondary education, as well as ensuring the debt incurred is manageable in terms of repayment. With an increase to the loan limit, there is always risk of financial hardship on the student, which may result in their inability to pay. Although the department encourages students to return to the Northwest Territories, statistics have shown that the number of students that return and remain in the territory 1 year after ceasing full-time studies is 81% for Indigenous students and 70% for non-Indigenous. After 5 years, the number reduces to 71% for Indigenous and 57% for non-Indigenous. As noted, the private members' bill is limited to increasing the personal loan limit of one person. It does not speak to the revolving loan fund. Both the personal loan limit and revolving loan fund are legislated under the Student Financial Assistance Act. The current revolving loan fund is $45 million, which was last increased in 2014-15. Finally, over the lifetime of the Northwest Territories Student Financial Assistance Program, over 5,000 residents have accessed student loans. Currently, there are over 2,000 students repaying their student loans, of which $3 million is repaid on an annual basis and $2 million is approximately what is forgiven. Although the SFA program encourages students to repay their student loans, there are approximately 35% of students that have defaulted in repayment obligations valued over $7.8 million. However, that also means that 65% of our students repay their student loans on a regular basis. Although the number of students nearing the $60,000 limit is minimal, there is the possibility that students may cap out. In closing, The Government of the Northwest Territories, the Department of Education, Culture, and Employment is committed to ensuring that SFA program provides a comprehensive suite of benefits to residents, as well as loan repayment incentives to help alleviate the burden of student loan debt. And once again, I just thank you for this opportunity to share information on the SFA program.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the presentation. So would like to go to the committee if they have any questions. Mr. Morris?
Thank you. Just waiting to see if committee members wanted to, but I don't mind stepping in. So at the time that the member brought this forward on the floor of the House, the minister's response was the department needed to do some analysis on potential impacts to the revolving fund. So I'm curious what the results of that analysis were. I see the department arguing that there are a limited number of students who will be impacted by this, so it seems like it'll be somewhat minimal. So I'm curious where the department sits at this time with impacts to the revolving fund, whether there's concerns about that, whether the $45 million limit would remain adequate if this change was implemented.
Minister Cleveland?
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Yeah, no, there were many conversations that happened once Bill 8 was introduced. The issue with being able to do some analysis around what impacts the changes that have already occurred in the 19th Assembly had to their first year in play, which was the previous school year. That school year ended on July 31st. So the department has not yet had the opportunity to do that analysis. Right now, the focus is very much on getting applications processed for students that are starting their school in the upcoming September start date of the school year. So that's not an analysis where I can provide any kind of data at this point. But knowing that our benefits did increase this past year, there was already work underway in acknowledgement that that might have a need to increase the revolving fund loan limit in response to that. So we are alive to the fact that there may need to be increases in the life of this assembly to the loan limit and also to the revolving fund limit, but we cannot provide any concrete data on that as yet. Is there anything that either of you would like to add to that? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr. Morris, do you have a follow-up?
Thanks. I did have follow-ups, but it's sounding like from the minister's answer, they may not have answers to the follow-ups. So my next question was going to be, I'll throw it on the table anyways. What would an appropriate increase be if not the 90,000 that's been suggested by the member, or I guess not suggested, but put forward by the member in a bill? Was the department not looking at increasing this limit at some point anyways? I mean, it seems to me that you are looking at increasing it, so I'm curious if the department had a figure of their own. I'm guessing I already know the answer to this question, but wanted to throw it out there.
Thank you. Minister Cleveland?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you to the member for the question. I'm always in favor of making sure that the supports we're providing to students are adequate and representative of the current cost of education, the current cost of students living down south, and also keeping in mind that students are expected to also make sure that they're generating some of their own income and applying for scholarships as well in conjunction with that. So I am absolutely in favor of us looking at this number and making sure that we are responsive to where it needs to be. But that being said, I could not provide the member with a concrete evidence-based figure at this time because I simply do not have that analysis done, given that the school year ended on July 31st. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Tester, do you have a question?
Yes, thank you. So it seems that the department's concerns are around creating potential hardship to students by increasing minimum monthly payments, limiting the amount of financial resources to the entire student population through financial impacts to the revolving fund. So to the minimum, I'll ask the question about the minimum monthly payment. To the minimum monthly payment, that increased, the chart you provided, the higher minimum payment, would that only kick in if students took those loans, or would it affect everyone the same way? Thank you.
Minister Cleveland?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, that would only kick in if students reach that $60,000 threshold, or the $90,000. So it's showing somebody completely capping out at $60,000 versus somebody completely capping out at $90,000, showing the difference in payment. Thank you.
Mr. Testart, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So why is that a concern? Because I mean, obviously, if you borrow more, you'll have to pay more. Like, I don't understand why that is a concern to the department. That's just how loan repayment works. Can you clarify? Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Very sorry, Madam Chair, how quickly I break the rules. Yeah, no, the concern is just ensuring that we are supporting Northern residents to make sure that at the end of the day, we are doing our part to make sure that people aren't incurring excessive debt. At this point, 65% of debts are repaid on a regular basis, but that means that there are additional loans that are not, and with the increased cost of living, there are a lot of demands on Northerners right now, so we just want to ensure that we're supporting people properly. Thank you.
Mr. Testart, do you have an additional question?
Yes, I do, but feel free to cut me off if there are other members who wish to ask questions, other committee members. So you can't base potential financial impacts to the revolving fund on last year's results because we haven't seen them yet. But surely you have data from previous years and can at least do an aggregate of what this might look like in terms of impacting the financial revolving fund. Has any of that been done? You've got more than, like, what I'm saying is you have more data than just 1 year. So why not use those other data sets to give us a sense of how it's going to potentially impact the revolving fund? Thank you.
Mr. Cleveland?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I would love to be able to pass this along to ADM Beauchamp to be able to provide a very detailed response to the member.
Okay, Ms. Beauchamp?
Thank you. The revolving loan limit, or revolving loan fund, sorry, is at the $45 million threshold. As of April 1, it was sitting at $40.8 million. Just as of the last week, we've realized that that amount is actually at $41.4 million, and it is anticipated that we may reach that revolving loan limit, the fund, probably within the next 2 academic years, just based on the current levels of support that are provided. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Morgan, do you have a question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thanks to all of you for taking the time to come in and answer our questions today. So my first question is, so currently there's a maximum repayment term of 14 years. And I assume that when you estimate, if you give people a higher loan, then they'll have to pay more each year, but that's based on the assumption that they would never be able to go over 14 years in terms of the time period that they're paying it off. Has that been looked at? Are there, barriers or challenges to going past 14 years as a repayment period? Does it get riskier in terms of the amount of people that might default as you get to a longer term? Are there restrictions in terms of bank rules? So where does the 14 years come from, and are there challenges to extending it? Thanks.
Thanks for that question. Over to the minister.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, that is a timeline that is legislated. So in order to change that, we would have to see further legislative amendments made to the Act. Thank you.
Thanks. Does the member have further follow-up questions?
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I understand that too. I'd appreciate knowing, maybe there hasn't been analysis done aside from just the annoyance and time and effort that it takes to change legislation, whether there are sort of external to the Legislative Assembly barriers to extending that 14-year period. Maybe you haven't done that analysis yet, but another question I have, so it seems that the program isn't intended or designed to support students that are pursuing master's degrees or further studies past an undergraduate, and I could be wrong, but it seems that you've designed to help a student get through an undergrad either in 4, 5, or 6 years, and then they kind of max out. So in the sort of theoretical case, what does the department envision that students are supposed to do if they want to pursue further graduate studies? Like, is the idea that, at that point they could find scholarships, or that there's other things they could access, or is it that you have sort of thought through how one could benefit from SFA throughout their entire studies and master's degree? I'm just trying to understand what the theory is behind. Is it just not intended to support graduate students, and if so, what's the theory behind what they're supposed to do instead? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. Minister Cleveland?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, there's definitely, over the years been changes to, the way that students work through their education, for sure. I remember back in the day, it was expected that the 6 years would get you through your undergraduate plus a master's, but we know that the cost of doing those things has changed, as we heard from MLA, or the MLA for Yellowknife Center earlier today, as well as the time that students on average go through those programs as well. So that has certainly changed over the years. The other change that was made in 2014 was that the fund used to be a limit of $60,000 over a lifetime. But now one of the changes that has been made is it's $60,000 from the revolving loan fund at a time. And so if you do pay down your debt, it increases the amount that you're able to then secure from it. The other thing about that is we do have an expectation too that students are working when they can, for example, during summer months. I'm not asking, students if they are not able to go work during the school year. That's not what I'm saying, but during their time off days for sure. And also an expectation that students work towards scholarships as well. I encourage students to apply for any and all scholarships that they think that they meet the criteria of, because we know that there's a lot of scholarship dollars that are left on tables as well every year. And I'd like to pass for further details on that one to ADM Beauchamp as well. Thank you. Oh, and if I can, Madam Chair. I misspoke. It is not a legislative change. It is a regulatory change that would have to occur for us to expand the 14 years that it would take to pay down the loan that people do have. So not as cumbersome as a legislative change, but it would be a regulatory change. So still a change that would have to happen. So I just wanted to correct the record on that one so that members have all of the information required. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Ms. Bichon, sorry about that.
Yes, so the Student Financial Assistance Program has improved over the last 2 decades. In 2000, the program was designed to basically get students in and out of the program. And then in 2015, as the Minister had mentioned, we focused on continued learning and wanting to encourage our residents to pursue that second degree or pursue a master's or doctorate degree, understanding that the benefits that we provide, there is that limit of $60,000, and we would encourage those students, once they've completed that first degree, to come back to the territory, work off some of that student loan debt, and then return back to full-time studies if that is their choice. It is noted that I did mention that I think about 50% of students are going into an undergraduate degree. Meanwhile, that amount actually, the percentage decreases for master's and doctorate to just less than 6%. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Now we're open for second set of questions. So, Mr. Tester, we'll start with you.
Thank Thank you. So just for clarification, is the minister supportive of this bill passing at this time? Or is the minister recommending the committee not support it moving forward? Thank you.
Minister Cleveland?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I would never, ever tell people what to do who represent their constituents, and I think we all have, different people that we hear from in regards to this and that we represent, and so I'd have to leave the ultimate decision with that to individual members at the time of their voting. However, I would say that I do agree with the premise of the bill. I just can't speak to the number provided because I don't have the evidence to back it up, and I think that us individually as MLAs always like to rely on evidence-based decision-making, and I just simply can't provide that to members at this time. Thank you.
Mr. Tester, do you have a follow-up?
Okay. I appreciate that that we all want to, no one wants to step on anyone's toes, and we all want to do our jobs as legislators and lawmakers. But fundamentally, I'd like to know if the position of the ministry is that this bill should proceed or not. I mean, I can make up my own decision, but it sounds like what we're hearing is the intention is good. Like the minister saying she welcomes the exploration of these issues is fine, or is clear. It's just when you're saying I don't have the evidence to support that number, it sounds to me like you're recommending that the bill not proceed with. I don't want to put words in the minister's mouth, but that's what I'm hearing, and it's fine. We have to take in all the different inputs, and if the ministry is telling us this is not the right time to do this, that's fine. But I'd rather have that clarity than having to guess or having to wait until, we get to third reading and cabinet stands up and votes this bill down. So, we're grown-ups, we can handle it. What's the minister's position? Thank you.
Minister Cleveland?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, ultimately it makes the best sense to be able to ensure that we're increasing the limit one time to where it should be, and that we're increasing the revolving fund at the same time. But I know realistically, I'm about a year away from being able to provide that information and come forward with something to members. My concern, of course, is that I have heard from a couple of students and MLAs about residents that they serve who are currently trying to access additional funding for their studies. And a delay in this would mean that they wouldn't have access to that. So I think I kind of wore my MLA and minister hat at the same time. So I would say with my minister hat on, it's always best to make evidence-based decisions with concrete numbers, especially given I'm going to need to increase the revolving fund, and that has an impact on the entire GNWT. But I want Northern students to be able to pursue their studies, especially knowing that the couple that I have heard from are pursuing sought-after and much-needed positions in the Northwest Territories. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now we'll go to Mr. Morris.
Thank you. Well, my first question was going to be, because the minister said they needed more time for analysis, it sounds like the answer is a year. I'm seeing a nodding head. I mean, what's standing out to me is it seems the department had the intention of doing this analysis, coming back with potential changes at a future date. They just haven't had the opportunity to do that. Is the department able to provide a timeline on the record for when they were planning to do their own analysis and come forward with potential changes similar to that of Bill 8 on their own time?
Minister Cleveland?
Can I just have a moment, please, Madam Chair? Yeah, Madam Chair, I know that, as I just said, I'm going to need to be able to, or looking at it being about a year, but I would like to be able to ask to provide a more detailed response to that question to committee in writing. And I can ensure that the response is also marked public so that committee can share it with their constituents as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister Cleveland. So, Mr. Morris, do you have a follow-up?
Sure. Thanks. The department, in some of the kind of additional information that they provided to the committee, seemed to be indicating that approximately, say the loan limit were increased tomorrow, around 46 students would be impacted by that. Let's say they all maxed it out. My kind of back of the napkin math is that 1.38, that would amount to about $1.38 million. So I guess I would ask the department if they could give an idea of what they estimate the impact might be if this bill went forward. In terms of the overall revolving fund, which it sounds like may need to be increased anyways, it seems that the impact is going to be relatively small, but I'd be curious the department could kind of opine on any numbers they might have, which would give us an indication as to what the impact might be.
Minister Cleveland?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, just so that we're all working with the same numbers, there are currently 24 students that are currently accessing benefits that have a loan balance between $40,000 and $60,000. So just want everybody to have the same numbers. It's 24. And for the detailed financial impact, I'd like to pass to ADM Beauchamp, please.
Yes, Ms. Beauchamp.
At this time, unfortunately, I do not have all the detailed information, but what I can share with you is that, as the minister had mentioned, there's 3% of our students are near that $60,000 loan limit, and unfortunately, without that increase happening immediately, they may be in a position where they will not be able to access student loans. However, noting that there is the grants that the Student Financial Assistance Program does offer to students that can support them throughout. Well, not throughout, but based on their eligibility.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll now go to Mr. McNeely. Do you have a question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question to the minister is, should this bill pass through and the loan limit get increased, will the terms and the conditions of the loan remain the same, or are we going to expect additional terms and conditions raised or included in the loans? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Minister Cleveland?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, the scope of the bill only changes the dollar amount that is the maximum that a student can have owing to the revolving fund, so their maximum loan amount. Whether or not there are additional regulatory changes that have to stem from that, I couldn't say until we go forward with this, but as it stands right now, all the regulations that are currently in place would adhere students to the 14-year repayment schedule. Thank you.
Mr. McNeely, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. If the minister would include additional information here, just for clarity purposes, there to the requested or to your suggestion on providing additional information in writing there to committee. Thank you.
Mr. Cleveland?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, the additional information that the member is looking for, can they just provide a little bit of clarity on what they would like added to the written information? Sorry, I wasn't clear. Is it in regards to repayment details as found currently in regulations? Thank you.
Mr. McNeely? Mr. McNeely, do you want to clarify that, please?
Okay, sorry about that, Madam Chair. I had to hit my unmute button here, but we can discuss that additional request by committee here after we're done. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay. Ms. Morgan, do you have a question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So one straightforward question I have is it the intention of the department going forward, you know, when you are ready with some changes you want to make, to put these kinds of dollar figures in regulations instead of in the legislation, like to change the legislation so that going forward, these kind of loan limits would be in regs and then they could be updated regularly or be attached to like an index or something that would allow them to be updated as inflation and cost of living increases. Is that part of the department's intention or plan?
Minister Cleveland?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, currently the revolving fund loan limit is found in legislation. It's not something that could, you know, easily so much be, because it's a revolving fund, it would, I believe, have to stay within legislation, within an act. And also something that any increases to have to go through regular FMB processes for approval. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Morgan, do you have a follow-up question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So as a result of that, are you saying that the limits on loan totals, the loan limits to individuals, also have to stay in legislation and could not be switched to regulations because they're so closely tied to the revolving fund? Is that the conclusion, or could potentially the loan limit to individuals be put into regs?
Minister Cleveland?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, that's my understanding, but I can also say I'm happy to, as the department moves through their work on this, make sure that we're looking at whether or not it is something that makes sense to stay in legislation, or if it does make sense for it to potentially move to regulation so that we can explore the parameters around that and make sure that we're looking at the angle as well that the MLA is sharing and being able to make changes easier within the revolving fund. So I can make the commitment of exploring that for sure with the department. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. One more question, Ms. Morgan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So my last question is, I mean, you mentioned that you would really need to do some analysis and potentially more data collection to be able to make this an evidence-based decision. Do you have in mind now what your top questions would be that you would need to analyze to, you know, feel confident that, you know, this is the right way forward, or we have the right dollar figure, and or could the minister provide to us in writing at some later date, you know, like a list of questions of what the really important things that the department feels it needs to investigate, the kind of analysis that needs to be done before we could wisely move forward on this decision? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yeah, thank you very much, Madam Chair. I think some of those key questions were raised in the development of this bill, which is, does the program go far enough, and what do students do if they have maxed out on the program, and what is our responsibility, or where do we want to be as a government as far as our support of students? But I am most happy to provide some examples of that further within writing, as the member has asked as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I do have a question too as well. Okay, so according to the chart that the department provided, the current status, so number of years, 4, 5, 6, that, you know, as an example that you as shown here. So the total loans from 37 to 56,000, 6 years, 56,000. And 5 years, 46,000. So for the remissible loan, the first one, 32,000. So that's forgiven. And the second and the fifth year, 40,000 is forgiven, part of the remissible loan, and 48,000. So repayable loan for the students So for the first student, at 32,000, so they're allowed to pay back $5,000 and $6,000 for 46,000. And then same goes for the next one, $56,000, the total loans. And so they're allowed to pay back that much, $8,000. Is that what it is? Yeah, Mr. Cleveland.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. So, Madam Chair, the repayment expected of a student would depend on parameters, like, for example, if they came home. So not all students, as we heard from ADM Beauchamp, are returning back to the Northwest Territories. So that would have an impact on what portion of their loan would be remissed and what would be expected of them. For students who do return home, they would have a portion of their loan that would be remissed and a portion that would be repayable to the GNWT and to the revolving fund limit. But I would like to be able to pass to ADM Beauchamp as well for additional information.
Okay. Ms. Bouchard?
Yes, the minister is correct in that the remissible loans, if a student does return to the Northwest Territories, they can apply for forgiveness on those loans, which would mean that they wouldn't have to necessarily pay those back. It's just forgiven by living in the Northwest Territories for a set period of time, depending on the community that they're residing in. And as for the repayable portion, they would be required to make monthly payments on that, and that amount would be paid if they're still living in the Northwest Territories without interest. Thank you.
Yeah, Minister Cleveland?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to add, just in case there are students listening, that it is important that they apply to have their loan and debt remissed. And so there are 2 deadlines throughout the year that students need to make sure that they are aware of, and they can talk to their student case officer about that and make sure that they are in compliance. So I think that's really important for students to know. Thank you.
Thank you. And for the basic grant, basic and supplementary grant, is that the same, part of the student loans, is that the same as what the Indigenous students are receiving? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Madam Chair, can I pass to ADM Beauchamp for those details?
Okay, Ms. Bouchard?
Yes, thank you. So Northern Indigenous students qualify for unlimited number of semesters of the basic grant, which helps with tuition, books, and travel, as well as the supplementary grant that helps with the monthly living expenses. Indigenous students do have the option to choose their monthly living allowance as a supplementary grant or a remissible loan. It's not an option to receive both. So in the aspect of what it is that an Indigenous student receives, they would just qualify basically for non-repayable grants, and if they choose to, they can receive repayable loans in addition. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, you said that, I know the NWT student, 19th Legislative Assembly lifted the cap, the student loan, the cap for the NWT Indigenous students, so which is good, you know, but prior to that, we didn't. So, I mean, that is one of the good moves that, you know, that Department of Education has done, because for so long that, you know, Indigenous students, because of the cap, you know, living in the small communities, and I'm sure, Ms. Beauchamp, you probably heard that before too, that I don't want to leave yet because I want to make a good choice. I want to make a wise decision of how I'm going to use. So in the meantime, because of that, a lot of students delayed their education, you know, or to pursue, or to go to, or to pursue post-secondary. I know a lot of them delay, and then, you know, and then life starts. So many of these students did not go anywhere. So by the time they decide to go, it was kind of late because, you know, like, I mean, life gets in the way that they have to start living. And but that was one of the best moves that NWT, the Department of Education has done, is lifting the cap for the Indigenous students, and that should not have been there. It shouldn't have ever happened, but it did. So we're not, so now that I'm very grateful and thankful to that 19th Legislative Assembly for lifting that cap for the Indigenous students. So now this will help more of our students to pursue higher education. Now that I see a lot of them are leaving, but so a lot of them are, not a lot of them, but I know, I guess we will find out within the next fiscal year to see how many of the Indigenous students have access the NWT SFA since that time, because we are encouraging the Indigenous students. I am encouraging the Indigenous students to apply, that they lift the cap and that, you can pursue your education. But that was holding them back before. That's why you see, that's why now that we have, we're asking for part of the employment strategy is that to have more Indigenous students, or, like we have a quote now, so it is good to see now that maybe hopefully that will improve the Indigenous employment within the GNWT workforce. But it's more of a comment. So I am very grateful, and then I'm glad that you said it, Ms. Bachand, about the unlimited. So I just want to open up to see if the members of the public have any questions for Mr. Hawkins or for Minister Cleveland regarding the Bill 8. So thank you. Okay, thank you. Now, please introduce yourself, including your first and last name, and proceed with your remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is James Thomas. I'm a Yellowknifer, lifelong Yellowknifer, and currently a law student at the University of New Brunswick. Up until last month, I was also a recipient of SFA. I've hit both my caps, one of which you guys are addressing here today, the $60,000 loan limit. I've also hit the 6-year grant limit, which isn't being addressed today, but I do think, and it's detailed in my written submission, that that's something that the committee should look at, although it is in regulations. I don't have too much prepared today because quite a bit has been said already, but I am here to ask committee support of the bill and encourage them to vote yes in the House. This is a bit of a historic bill. I don't think a bill has ever got to second reading with so few yays, according to OpenNWT. But I hope that that changes as it goes forward. I received 4 years of SFA funding for my undergraduate degree, and I'm currently going into my final year of law school, which is the 3rd year. My funding ran out midway through my 6th, and I made sure to get as much funding as I could every single year. And I will note that as of the regulation change in 2023, that cap is also increased, so people will be running out faster. They mentioned that the last change to the Act and the cap, well, I think the last change to the 45 million was in 2015, and the change to the cap was before that. I will note to committee that the government of the Northwest Territories revenue has increased over 700 million since then, and none of that money has gone towards the Student Financial Assistance Program. I'll also note that this is a loan program, so there have been some comments about the financial impacts of this, and I do get that the minister needs to go back and look at how this is going to impact the overall thing, and I'm glad that we had a bit of back of the napkin math here. I don't think the financial constraint should be the main priority here. should this pass, there's a handful of regulations and internal policies that needs to be changed from the minister herself to actually push this forward. Since I've already been denied SFA funding this year, I don't expect, especially given the timeline, that I'll see any of this funding, which is unfortunate. I'll address two other concerns. I think one was that students will receive too much debt in the end. I don't think I accept that as an answer. I think you need to give a little more respect to individual students and what they're willing to take on as loans. I know throughout my journey to law school that this cap has been in the back of my mind. Emily Morgan alluded to it earlier when she questioned what students would do if they didn't have this funding. For me, it was not going to the school that I wanted to go to. I was in this building when I got an acceptance to my dream law school, and then I went and looked at the tuition and I couldn't afford it. It's not pursuing more education. There's an additional MBA program associated with the law school that I'm not doing because I know I'm not going to have this funding. And of course, it's pursuing scholarships and other things, but really it's bouncing around to make sure that I can finish school. And the fact that this $60,000 loan limit hasn't increased and we cap out our grant limit at 6 years when law takes 7 at minimum, medical degrees take 7. You know, I can go on about the specialized degrees in the north that we need that all surpass this 6 years. I think the members' initial thought that this is primarily an undergraduate program is right on the dot. I don't think the department is factoring in that a lot of these students need to go on for more education, and the cap in the regulations of the 6 years and certainly this $60,000 loan limit kind of indicates that they're not taking that into account. I think that may be all I want to say on this. There's a lot on SFA that I think needs to be looked at, and I hope that this foray into the bill, which only touches a portion of it, sparks committee's interest to pursue questioning the department on SFA matters, because there's a lot within regulations that I think needs to be changed here. Young people don't interact with the government a whole lot aside from this program, and I think it's a wonderful program. I think it's probably the most generous in Canada, but I also think it has to be because my friends in the rest of Canada don't need to take 3 flights to get to their school, or they go home on weekends to do laundry or whatever. There's increased costs associated with it, and if there was a law school in the Northwest Territories, I would love to be here, studying there, and staying here. And anyways, that's all I have to say, committee, and if there's any questions, I'd happily answer them, but thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Thomas, yes. Committee, do you have any questions? Okay, Mr. Morris?
Thanks, and thanks for taking the time to come to present to committee, Mr. Thomas. I really appreciate you doing that. I guess you started to answer the question that I was going to ask you, and that was just about the department's assertion that they need to be cautious about students kind of incurring debt. I mean, my assumption is that students who want to go to law school or become doctors or whatever are going to have to incur that debt in some way, shape, or form, either way. So I was curious to kind of hear your story about how that's going to work. I mean, it seems that the debt is going to happen, whether that comes from a bank, whether it comes from some other institution that the student goes to when SFA is maxed out. So can you speak to that a little bit, or is it simply, maybe you can just speak to your own experience on that question.
Okay, Mr. Thomas?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the member for that question. Yeah, you're right that it's a cost that's going to be incurred regardless, and I think that's actually one of the most impressive things about the SFA program is its ability through the forgiveness to encourage students to stay here. If I was capped out and I go get a student line of credit or pursue a loan through other means, I'm no longer having that incentive to come back here and pay it off. I'd certainly rather be indebted to the GNWT and have these forgiveness programs where I have to come back and live here and, solidify roots after taking so much money than be paying back to RBC with an interest rate and have no incentive to stay here. And I'll also just touch on, in the presentation, there were two numbers on how much students pay back. One if they hit the 60,000, and then one projected if they hit the 90. I believe it was around 400 and then 700. This may just be a miscommunication, but when I came back and I was quite near that cap, I wasn't paying back on my portion that would be forgiven. So I came back for 2 years and started paying back my loans. It was around 200 rather than the 400. So I think that projection's a little off, because it doesn't seem like SFA is charging students on the remissible portion of their loan. That 700 and 400 seems like it would be, had they taken out the max and then gone down south and have none of those repayment incentives.
Mr. Morris? Do you have a question for Mr. Thomas?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Thomas, for taking the time to come and share this with us. It seems like, the department's theory of what one could do if one wanted to pursue graduate studies is, come back here, work for a few years, make some money, save up more, and then go back to grad school or whatever. Is that something that would have been viable for you, or, what do you think of that sort of recommendation as to that's a viable way forward within the current limits?
Mr. Thomas?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the question. That's kind of precisely what I did, is I did my undergrad, I came back and I worked an internship here in the Ledge, actually, for 2 years, 2.5. And I think that's an admirable recommendation. I just think when you put the onus on students to do that, you're going to have a handful of them that won't pursue education once they start working. If that's the initial plan, come back, start working, get some money, and then go off and do your master's, you're going to get a handful of students that just say, oh, you know what, I'm out of that education stream, I'm not going to do it anymore. And I think that's a shame. And I think if someone has the capacity to finish their undergrad, jump right into a master's or go do law school right after it, more power to them, and the SFA program should reflect their ability to do that.
Ms. Morgan, do you have a follow-up question?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate you laying out for us how even the current limits have impacted your choices, not being able to go to the ideal school or take a program that you think could have been better, or in addition to what you're already taking. Can you help us understand how this, like, even going forward and finishing your degree, like, how these limits impact you? So, can you access other lines of credit or loans, or, someone might say, what difference would this make? I mean, you'll just find another way to get a loan or find a way to complete it and do it. What difference does it make? But can you help illustrate for us what other options you have available at this point to you, and why that's a challenge or a problem in your view? Thank you.
Mr. Thomas?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks to the member for the question. It's a fair question, because there are other options to pursue to fill this out. For myself, having funding for a majority of this and then kind of having the last 1.5 years unfunded, I was lucky enough through scholarships and through working every single summer and a handful of other things to be able to fund my studies. Without it, it's tight. I'm making decisions, financial decisions based on that. I imagine for other students, it's taking out a line of credit. As to applying to other jurisdictions' funding programs, I'm not sure you can. That actually is a question beyond me, but I believe there's something in the Act that says you cannot be a recipient of another jurisdiction's student financial assistance program and benefit from the Northwest Territories one, but I think that's a better question to the minister. Yeah, there are options there. There are certainly predatory options too. I don't think a student line of credit is the most predatory, but should you not be approved for that, you may, aside from seeking out family members or working part-time during your studies, have to resort to taking out loans with very high interest rates, which I certainly don't think any of the committee members here or any of the students interested in this matter would want to do during their studies.
Thank you. Mr. Tistart, do you have a question?
Yes, and I just want to thank Mr. Thomas for coming here today and for being an advocate for this this issue. And I think it's good to hear directly from the students. We've heard from a number of students as well who have written in. Is there like a student association or some sort of community that you engage with, Mr. Thomas, that kind of provides that feedback loop to the people are talking to each other to assess this? Because I often find with financial matters, no one really talks to each other about, you know, their terms of mortgages or rates or how much their salaries are, and as a result, things stay relatively fixed. So we're getting a lot of correspondence now, but is there kind of a larger community of people who have these concerns that we might be able to tap into? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr. Thomas?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks to the member for the question. There is not. I was furiously texting people and sending emails last night, so I'm happy to hear that the committee's starting to get a bit more correspondence on the bill. I think this is an issue that is present for a lot of students, and you know, the response you're getting, it's hard to get students interested to write into a committee about this, regardless of how interested they are, is essentially what I'm trying to say. But no, there's not a organization for this. This has kind of just been word of mouth and something that many students talk about, because the Student Financial Assistance Program has led to quite a bit of frustration among my peers, and we all kind of talk about it and joke about it, and I think all are interested in a greater review of the program. And yeah, so this has been something I've been talking about for quite a while, and I think the response you're getting is really just word of mouth and other students interested in the issue.
Mr. Tistart, do you have a follow-up question?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I am a product of the SFA system. They funded my education, and most of my cohort, that was a big benefit of being a Northern kid. And I saw, you know, my friends in Southern institutions have to work second jobs and hustle for money when we were pretty comfortable, because I lived with another Northerner and we pooled our benefits. So it was a great situation. But over time, of course, these things erode because you need to keep up with it. And I think the sponsor of the bill made that very clear, that this is driven, one, by feedback from students, and two, by the inertia that's taken place since the last time things were changed. So how do you take it? What's your reaction when you hear the concern from government that, you know, the planning needs of government, the financial needs of governments, these are more important than the needs of students? What's your reaction to that? Thank you.
Mr. Thomas?
Thank you, Madam Chair, for and thank you to the member for the question. I've been in communication with the minister on this in the past, and I fully believe she's interested in the financial needs of students. I appreciate, I brought this before her as a regular member, and she asked the Premier, then Minister at the time, a number of questions in the House regarding this. His answer was no, they're not interested in looking at this issue, and committed to a couple other things that the department hasn't followed up on, including publishing some of the numbers that were spoken about today about students returning and all that, which I would encourage the committee to pursue through an annual report. So I went on a little tangent there. I fully believe the minister is interested in this. I do get a little frustrated hearing, oh, this is going to take a year. I've kind of accepted that I'm not going to see any of this increased funding. My educational journey is going to come to an end very soon, luckily. But and as to their modeling too, they said they need another year for this. They made some major regulation changes a year ago and did a What We Heard report. If you look at the What We Heard report, there are sections in there that say that students brought this forward. This isn't a new issue. And if Mr. Hawkins is right that this is already in the pile, I would hope that the department already has some modeling going on how this is going to impact it. A full year, yeah, it does leave me a little frustrated, and that's why I encourage the committee to move forward on this without all your modeling and your expectations of what this is going to cost, because I do think that number is available today. Give me an Excel file in 5 minutes and access to SFA, and I could tell you how much it's going to cost them, or give you a ballpark answer. So I wouldn't say the department's putting financial constraints above students. I do think they're going to pursue this eventually. I just think that this is the correct route to do it, because time is of the essence for some students, and I think the department can work in the background in between this being passed and passing all or amending all the regulations to get this change approved, to figure out what everything's gonna be like.
Thank you. Mr. McNeely, do you have a question for Mr. Thomas?
Yes, thanks, Madam Chair, and thanks, Mr. Thomas, for sharing your experiences. To some degree, you're saying that in your earlier presentation on the two avenues of legislation over regulations, our SFA or the supports should be designed over a 6 and 7 year period. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr. Thomas?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks to the member for the question. Yes, within the regulations, the grant caps off at 12 semesters of funding, equated to 6 years. I don't think that 6-year cap for Northern non-Indigenous students is a good policy decision, regardless. The financial cap, that has a couple more numbers behind it, but the 6 years, yes, if committee, and of course this outside this bill, if committee is interested, I would encourage them to encourage the minister to change that within regulations. And you know what, even remove this cap from the act, because I think it takes quite a bit of work to change an act, and I don't think these static numbers should be in there. I think that's kind of just a legislative drafting comment. I think nearly all this should be outside of the act and contained within regulations. And if the revolving fund, if there's some legal jargon behind that you need this $45 million to be in there, that's fine, but I certainly don't think the $60,000 needs to be contained within the act. I think it can be moved out into regulations and dealt with by the minister. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr. McNeely, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. It's more of a comment. I want to thank you for the other suggestions outside Bill number 8. Bill 8 certainly opened the doors for further discussions on making this program more efficient through reviews and suggestions by your experience, Mrs. Thomas, and I thank you for sharing that. Mussy.
Thank you. Mr. Thomas, there was more of a comment, but it's up to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't think I have any more things to say today. I've talked quite enough.
Ms. Morgan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have one more question that I'm puzzling over here. So the sponsor of the bill told us that like the primary purpose of this bill is to ensure that students come back and that they have, a strong tie back to the north so that we ensure that, our northern students and talents come back and help serve our communities. But if someone has, maxed out and they've taken advantage of SFA for their first 6 years of their schooling, and then like you maybe had a few years where they couldn't access it and had to find other means to fund it, does that mean that you won't come back? Like, I would assume that the obligations for getting those loans or grants for the first 6 years means that regardless of what happened in your last year or two of schooling, if you wanted, the forgiveness, you would have to come back anyway. Can you explain in your view how this change to the bill, increasing the limit to 90,000, would impact students' decision about whether they come back or not? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr. Thomas?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks to the member for the question. I think it comes down to if a portion of it, your 60,000 or 90,000, is forgiven upon returning, and this I'd have to speak for another student because I fully intend to come back. I've signed on to my articles here in Yellowknife. I love the North and want to stay. For others, I think having a $60,000 and a portion of it is the repayable or remissible, I should say. Having a $60,000 payment over your head versus a 90, I think that extra 30,000, if that can be forgiven by coming back, would encourage people to come back. It's a little sad of a prospect that you need to have this, hey, if you don't come back, you owe us $30,000 more, because I think everyone should want to come back. But I do think by giving students more access to the funds when they contemplate whether to come back or to stay down south, the prospect that a greater portion isn't forgiven because they took out more, I do think that will factor into their decision to return.
Ms. Morgan, do you have a follow-up? Okay. I do have a question too myself. Okay. Maclean Magazine, well, this was a few years ago, or maybe back in 2015, 16, somewhere around there, but did identify that UFA was one of the best post-secondary program or institution. I'm not sure about the law program because I know certain institutions are good, like even with the UFS, nursing programs. So, but I want to ask you, why did you choose to go to Maritime Province? Why didn't you stick closer to home? I'm not too sure if you're P2 or P3, but I just wanted to ask, why did you chose Maritime Province? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I didn't get into the U of C. I didn't apply to U of A, but I think their requirements for the law program were a little above what I was doing in my undergraduate. So if I could have been closer home, I would have. But the University of New Brunswick took me, and I have family out there, of course, and I love New Brunswick. But yeah, a couple of factors at play aside from just wanting to be far away.
Another one too is what is the average salary for a lawyer?
Sorry, Madam Chair, I'm not sure I can answer that. I haven't received that salary yet. I'm a few years away, but for the GNWT, I know their articling starts at around 85, which is quite a good salary. I don't know where it goes from there. I haven't been that far along in my process to know it, but certainly I believe it's a quite okay salary.
So then the decision will be up to you, because you can pay off according to what we see over here, to the chart, to the current status information here. So then you don't really need to return to the north to pay off the student loan. You can do that living on the intern salary. Thank you. Okay, is there any other questions from anybody online? Okay. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Thomas, for coming and talking to us, making your remarks, and I really do appreciate it. Yeah. So seeing no further individuals who wish to speak to Bill 8, committee would like to thank everybody who attended today's public hearing. The feedback we have received today will be considered by the committee in our review of Bill 8. If people are watching at home and would like to provide feedback, there is still time. The deadline for written submission on Bill 8 is Friday, August 23rd. Please send your comments to committees@ntassembly.ca. Now, this concludes the public portion of this afternoon's proceeding. Member will take a 5 minutes break. Thank you.